Hi, Hank. Welcome back to my series in which I teach you how to knit because the internet has dragged you for filth. I'm not going to lie. A lot of comments, and I feel for you. But the thing that I mostly believe in is that the knitting community is overall supportive and always willing to teach. So I am going to share my information and knowledge with you. If you're not Hank Green and you're just a true beginner, this is a great video series for you to follow so that you can get started on your knitting journey. My name is Lindsay at Doing the Most Design, and I've been a knitter for over 20 years, taking it very seriously in the last 5 or 6 years. And I have a background in education. I make a lot of tutorials for beginning knitters so that they can become fiber baddies. But this is a tutorial series for absolute true, I've never even held yarn in my hands before, kind of people who want to become beginner knitters. So my last video, I showed you about how you can relatively compare the yarn size and the needle size of whatever materials you have in front of you so that you can get started on your first free-form project. And by that I mean we're not really going to be following a pattern. I'm just going to teach you some basic stitches, and then you knit up like a dishcloth or a square or a rag of some sort. In this video, though, I want to give you a little bit more understanding about yarn because hopefully by now you are excited to start your knitting journey, Hank. And I want to provide you with some information so that you can make your first yarn purchase and know that you're making a purchase that you're going to ultimately really enjoy working with, especially for your first project. Now, there are a variety of fibers, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of other qualities about yarn that may be relevant to you before you go and make your purchase. So first off, one of the things that knitters are going to be looking at is going to be the weight of the yarn, and I covered those weights in those categories in my last video, so revisit that or check out my profile if you haven't seen that video yet. And then other than that, we really want to think about a couple of things, so like fiber and sourcing. We also want to think about whether the yarn has a hand to it, and I'll explain what that means. And we might also want to think about if the yarn has a halo to it, and then also the color of the yarn. So that is kind of the roadmap of what I'm going to be talking about today. Unfortunately, in this video, I'm going to be mostly doing yapping because I don't actually have a lot of these yarns. I don't personally buy some of these types of yarns, so I just don't have them in my stash to be able to share with you. So the first thing that we want to talk about is fiber. So there are fibers that are going to be natural fibers and synthetic fibers. Synthetic fibers are usually made from petroleum products, and they cover the range. Usually we call them like acrylic, or they can be a blend of natural and synthetic fibers such as wool acrylic blend, cotton acrylic blend. Now, the reason why I mentioned the fact that they are synthetic and they're made out of petroleum is because within the knitting community, there's a lot of discourse and argument about whether it is ethical to use wool that is from sheep, for example, or other natural fibers that are from animals, because vegans do not want to use animal byproducts. So they tend to prefer things that are like cotton or other plant-based yarns, talk about that in a second, or something like synthetic fibers like acrylic. But then people who also really care about natural fibers like plant and animal-based fibers, they usually kind of have a beef with the fact that acrylic yarn can be a major contribution to pollution and climate change and things like that. So there's a lot of conversation within the community about that, and I leave it up to you about your conscience about what you personally use. I have a mixture of synthetic and animal fiber and even plant-based fibers in my own collection, but I prefer not to buy acrylic yarn if I can help myself from doing it. Okay, so synthetic yarns, we've talked about that. And then for natural fibers, we have a variety of sources for that. So we're going to have animal-based fibers and we're going to have plant-based fibers. Animal-based fibers, the most common one is going to be sheep's wool, and then there are a variety of sheep breeds, and they all have different qualities to their yarn. To the texture of their wool that then adds some quality to the yarn. The main thing about sheep's wool is that the wiggliness of the little fibers of their wool hairs can contribute to a stretchiness for the yarn, which then can make it drape more nicely. And so drape is like when you hold it up, think about curtains. Does it flow freely or does it just stand stiffly? So that's what we mean when we talk about drape. And then you can also have other animal sources like Angora, which is coming from a type of rabbit breed. You can also have alpaca, which is a type of, what are they called? Ungulates. I think you can, give me a comment video and respond to me about what kind of animals that alpacas are. I'm adding in a little note here because I forgot to mention that we can also get yarn from goats, and a special type of yarn is called cashmere. It is considered one of the most elite type of animal fibers that you can make into yarn. And then we also get mohair, and I can't remember what animal we get mohair from, but it is also considered a very elite fiber. So cashmere and mohair tend to be quite expensive as far as animal products, as far as animal fibers are concerned. But one of the things about mohair in particular is that people like the halo that it creates. And I'll talk about halo later on in this video. I've seen, oh my gosh, the internet is such a crazy place. I've even seen people collect the cat hair from around their apartment and then spin that into yarn. So really, the pie is the limit when it comes to animal-based fibers. Now, there are obviously reasons why if you have an allergy to cat dander, you would not want to do the cat yarn, but it is possible. It's one of those things where they were too busy asking, can we do it, to bother to ask, should we do it? So that's that. Then we also have plant-based fibers, and those are going to be most commonly cotton is probably the most price accessible for, I would say, the American community. Then we also have linen. I have heard through the grapevine, I haven't personally purchased linen, but I have heard that it is more expensive. So there is linen, and then we also might have hemp, and then bamboo is another natural plant-based fiber. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it is a list to just let you know that, good golly, there's a whole variety that's out there. Okay, so now when you first think about the type of fiber that you want, the next thing you might want to do is thinking about sourcing. And so as you can imagine, there are a variety of places in the world that produce sheep's wool. So you can imagine getting it from Australia, from the UK, and Scotland in particular, or from here in the United States. Because of our economic situation internationally with the tariffs, there are a lot of brands that produce in the European Union or in the UK that are no longer shipping to US customers as individual buyers. They may ship out to US vendors, but they're not shipping to individual customers because the tariffs make it too cost prohibitive for them to do that. So keep that sort of stuff in mind as you might be exploring different yarns online. But I highly recommend that you try to Google and find your local yarn store in Missoula and see if you can't support a local business that's brick and mortar, probably not guaranteed, but probably owned by women, and support the business that they are doing, because yarn stores really took it on the chin during COVID when people could not come in, and then also do sit and stitches, or what we call stitch and bitches, which typically women, but all people usually are welcome. They're very inclusive communities where people get together maybe once a week and they stitch and socialize together. Hey, if you have watched this video all the way to the end, thank you so very much for doing that. Please know that this video is one section of a much larger video that I was calling part 2. That part 2 video was about 18 minutes long, so I decided to break it up into different components. This component, as you just watched, was over the different types of fiber that you can find in yarn, and then sourcing for natural fibers in particular. The next section is going to cover yarn, hand, and halo. And then the last section from the part 2 video, that again is very long, is going to cover yarn put-ups, which is another way of saying if you find yarn as a hank or as a skein, like what is the storage method that stores actually keep the yarn in whenever they receive it in shipments. You can also go to my profile and check out the first video, part 1 of this Teaching Hank Green How to Knit series, in which I talk about yarn weights and knitting needle gauges. And then in future videos, I'm going to be teaching how to do the long tail cast on, teaching knitting and purling stitches with consistency. And then I'll probably also teach stockinette stitch and garter stitch. And then maybe just have Hank do like a little washcloth or something square, like a little coaster or a swatch of some sort. On that note, I'm also going to be doing a video teaching why you do a swatch and how you then understand what you've learned after doing a swatch. So keep your eyes open for that. If you would like that sort of content, please follow my account here so that you can make sure that you get it in your feed. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to tag Hank Green in the comments down below so that he sees that I'm making these videos for him. Okay, thank you.